What if your anxiety isn't a problem to fix, but a signal you're finally seeing clearly? In a world obsessed with normal, feeling too much makes you seem broken. But what if you're not broken, just awake? We live in a culture that pathologizes sensitivity. The moment someone feels too much, thinks too deeply, or becomes too aware of their surroundings, we begin to suspect there is something wrong with them. Labels are attached. Clinical terms are thrown about like spiritual bandages, and the pressure to get better replaces the invitation to look deeper. What if anxiety is not something to fix? What if it is not a disease but a signpost? You see, the mind that becomes anxious is the mind that has begun to notice. It notices the inconsistencies in the way we live. It notices how people smile with their mouths but frown with their eyes. It notices the absurdity of a system that demands productivity but never peace. It notices that something, somewhere, is fundamentally out of alignment. And this noticing causes discomfort. Not because it is wrong, but because it is true. An anxious person often feels like the walls are closing in, like time is speeding up, like something urgent is happening, but no one else seems to care. That feeling is not irrational. It is the emotional equivalent of waking up in a burning room while everyone else is still dreaming. The anxious mind is not broken. It is awake in a world that is asleep. That very dissonance between one's internal alertness and the external apathy creates what we call anxiety. Modern society has created a very narrow definition of what it means to be well. To be well, by their standard, is to conform, to operate smoothly within the machinery of consumption and conformity. It is to wake up, go to work, follow orders, smile when required, and never question the rhythm. But the moment one steps out of that rhythm, even for a breath of silence or a question of meaning, they are labeled a misfit, a rebel, or worse, unstable. And yet this so-called instability is the very beginning of spiritual insight. For it is only when you feel discomfort in the world that you begin to search for truth beyond it. The anxious person is often a seeker, not of distractions, but of something real, something meaningful, something alive. Their mind is not overloaded by random fears. It is overwhelmed by the weight of truth breaking through the surface. There is a deep intelligence in anxiety. It suggests the presence of an inner compass that refuses to align with falseness. The anxious person cannot pretend to enjoy shallow conversations. They cannot watch the news without feeling the collective madness of the world echo through their chest. They cannot immerse themselves in meaningless work without feeling that something sacred within them is suffocating. This is not dysfunction. This is awareness. We often forget that the anxious mind is highly attuned. It picks up on subtleties that others miss. A shift in tone, a lie concealed beneath polite language, the emotional undercurrents of a room, they feel it all. This is a kind of psychic radar, a spiritual sensitivity, but it is rarely honored. Instead, it is medicated, muted, and marginalized. Because if too many people began to feel like this, the entire structure of society would have to change. So we are taught not to listen to this inner voice. We are told to distract ourselves, to consume, to stay busy. But the more we suppress this inner awareness, the louder it gets. The body begins to speak in the only language it knows: tightness, breathlessness, panic, urgency. These are not symptoms of disease. They are symptoms of a soul that refuses to stay asleep. To be anxious is to be in transition. It is the turbulence that comes not from falling apart, from outgrowing the shell of a smaller self. It is what happens when the old illusions no longer satisfy and the new truths have yet to fully take root. The anxious person is a spiritual traveler caught between worlds, the world they were conditioned to accept, and the world their soul knows is possible. And in this liminal space there is disorientation. There is pain. There is trembling. But there is also awakening. There is the spark of insight that cuts through the fog. There is the glimpse of reality without the filter of comfort. There is the whisper, "This is not all there is. Something more awaits." The world tells you to fix yourself. But maybe the problem is not within you. Maybe the problem is that you were never meant to be comfortable in a culture that trades authenticity for approval. Maybe anxiety is not the malfunction. It is the rejection of the mask. Maybe, just maybe, anxiety is not a disorder. It is the soul remembering how to feel. From the moment we enter this world, we are taught, subtly and directly, that control is safety, That mastery over our environment, our feelings, our future, even other people, is the path to peace. We're taught to grip tightly the reins of life, to plan, to prepare, to organize, to anticipate, to defend. And for a time, this illusion is comforting. It gives us the feeling that we are steering the ship, that nothing can surprise us, that we are somehow above the chaos. But control, real control, is an illusion. And the more we chase it, the more anxious we become. Anxiety is often the direct result of our refusal to accept the truth that life cannot be pinned down. We believe that if we can just organize our minds, our schedules, our relationships, everything will finally be still. But stillness does not come from order. Stillness comes from surrender. The person who insists on controlling every outcome, every emotion, every narrative, is at war with the very fabric of existence, because life, by its nature, is unpredictable. It moves like water. It slips through fingers that try to grasp it. And when we resist this fluidity, when we demand certainty, our inner world tightens. Think of the river. The person who attempts to dam every twist and current will only cause flooding and disruption. But the one who learns to float with the current, who adapts to the flow, who stops clinging to the rocks, will be carried peacefully downstream. The mind that obsesses over control is like the dam builder. It believes that peace can be manufactured, constructed, enforced. But peace is not engineered. It is uncovered when resistance ceases. At the core of anxiety lies a powerful conflict, the desire to be safe versus the reality that life offers no permanent safety. We try to control our emotions because we fear what will happen if we don't. We try to control others because we fear being abandoned, rejected, or misunderstood. We try to control the future because the unknown terrifies us. But in all of this controlling, we are exhausted. Not because life is too chaotic, but because we're trying to wrestle the wind into submission. There is a quiet insanity in the modern world's obsession with control. We try to optimize every second of our day, track every calorie, manage every social interaction, predict every financial turn. We read books on how to be more productive, how to influence people, how to win at life. And yet, the more we attempt to dominate reality, the more disconnected we feel. The human soul was not built to live in a spreadsheet. It was made to dance, to wonder, to stumble, to rise, to fall, to laugh, to cry, to feel. Control is not freedom. It is a cage painted gold. We confuse it for strength, but it is a trembling hand behind a locked door. It is fear in disguise. It is the refusal to trust. And trust, radical, terrifying, beautiful trust, is the gateway to liberation. But trust cannot arise in the one who clings. Trust only lives in the open palm, the surrendered heart, the mind that dares to say, I don't know what's coming, and that's okay. The tragedy is that many of us suffer needlessly, not because our lives are broken, but because we cannot accept their wildness. We want neat lines. We want tidy outcomes. We want predictability in a world that thrives on spontaneity. And when life refuses to obey our demands, we interpret that as failure. We think something's wrong with us. We tighten our grip even more. We create rituals of control, checking, overthinking, worrying. These become our comfort, even as they bind us. But consider this: when you hold your breath, trying to control it, you become tense. Your body screams for release, and only when you exhale, when you let go, does relief come. The same is true for your inner life. The need to control suffocates your soul. The act of letting go is the beginning of real clarity. What you fear most, uncertainty, change, vulnerability, is not your enemy. It is the door you must walk through. Even your thoughts, when observed carefully, resist control. Try to hold onto a thought and it slips away. Try to silence the mind and it rebels louder. But when you watch the thoughts, let them pass like clouds in the sky, you begin to see that you were never the thoughts to begin with. You were the space they moved through. And in that space, there is no control, only presence. To live is not to dominate life, but to move with it. Like a dancer responding to music not of their own making. You don't control the music, but you can move beautifully with it. The anxious mind wants to stop the song until it understands every note. But life is improvised. It does not offer rehearsal. The music plays, whether you step or stumble. And maybe that's the point. Maybe the beauty is not in precision, in participation. There is a peculiar irony in being human. We yearn to feel alive, to experience depth, meaning, and connection. And yet, when these experiences arrive, raw, unfiltered, and overwhelming, we recoil. We confuse the magnitude of our feelings with something being wrong. We tell ourselves we are broken simply because we are feeling the full weight of life. But to feel deeply is not to be unwell. To feel deeply is to be awake. When you are awake, you begin to see through the layers of distraction that most people spend their lives hiding behind. You start to hear the spaces between words, the meaning behind silences, the subtle grief in a stranger's smile. You begin to feel the tension in crowded rooms, not just as noise, but as spiritual static. You notice the dissonance in the world, the way people speak of peace while living in conflict, the way love is spoken about but rarely practiced, the way society rewards performance over presence, and it all sits heavily within you. The person who feels everything deeply is not lost. They are tuned in, like a sensitive instrument. They vibrate with every note in the environment. Joy, sorrow, beauty, injustice. This sensitivity is not weakness. It is the echo of consciousness recognizing itself in the world. But because we live in a culture that praises detachment and dismisses emotion, this depth is misunderstood. The world tells the deeply feeling person to toughen up, to get over it, to numb, to filter, to shrink. But the soul refuses to shrink. It was never meant to. To feel deeply is to carry both the ache of the world and the wonder of it. You may look at the stars and feel an unbearable longing, not for anything specific, but for something more real than what you've been shown. You may walk through the noise of modern life and feel displaced, like a time traveler stranded in a world of flashing lights and shallow connections. You may cry, not just for yourself, but for others, for the forgotten, the silenced, the ones who suffer without voice. And it can feel like too much, but that feeling, too muchness, is the threshold. It is where the old structure breaks and something far greater begins to emerge. When you are awake, you are no longer interested in the games people play. You stop pretending. You stop needing to belong to systems that feel hollow. You begin to crave honesty, silence, presence. The ordinary world no longer satisfies because you have tasted something deeper, even if only briefly. And now, there is no going back. This awareness does not come without cost. You may find yourself isolated, misunderstood, even ridiculed. Others may say you're too sensitive, too intense, too serious. But what they really mean is you make them uncomfortable. Your presence reminds them of what they've buried. Your honesty challenges the masks they wear, and so they will try to dim your light, not out of malice, but out of fear. Because when someone is deeply awake, it exposes the sleep of those around them. And yet, the gift of deep feeling is immense. You begin to experience beauty in places others overlook. A falling leaf becomes a miracle. A child's laughter breaks your heart open. A moment of silence can feel like eternity. You see the world not as a collection of things to consume, but as a living, breathing mystery to engage with. Every encounter, every breath, every sensation carries a kind of sacredness. Even pain becomes a teacher, not a punishment, but a portal to understanding. To be awake is to live without the buffer. Most people move through life with filters, screens, substances, superficiality. They do not want to feel too much, because to feel is to confront. But the awake person is done avoiding. They would rather hurt honestly than smile falsely. They would rather face the storm than live under artificial sunshine. And in this courage, there is a strange kind of peace. Not the peace of comfort, but the peace of alignment. The world will often try to convince you that you're broken for feeling deeply. But those who feel deeply are not broken. They are breaking through. They are touching the heart of things. They are remembering something ancient, something real, something that cannot be found in distraction, wealth, or external validation. They are tasting life at its source. The laughter and the tears, the wonder and the fear, the beauty and the ache, all of it, all at once. When people speak of anxiety, discomfort, fear, or existential restlessness, they often turn to silence as a remedy. The world advises meditation, mindfulness, solitude, hoping that stillness will drown out the noise. What many are truly seeking is not silence, but escape. They do not want to hear less, they want to feel less. They hope that by quieting the world, they will quiet the storm within. But silence is not an escape. Real stillness does not come from suppression, but from surrender. Surrender is not passivity, it is not resignation. It is not giving up in defeat. Surrender is the sacred act of releasing the illusion of control and allowing life to move through you. It is the moment when you stop clenching your mental fists and open your hands to the unknown. It is not a collapse, it is an awakening. And in that awakening, the pain you tried to silence becomes the teacher you finally listen to. Anxiety often builds because we resist what is. We wrestle with the moment, fight the tide, we argue with reality. We try to control our thoughts, to fix our emotions, to rearrange the chaos into neat little boxes. But life doesn't work like that. Emotions do not obey commands. The heart does not follow spreadsheets. And so we end up in conflict, not just with the world, with ourselves. We have been conditioned to believe that relief lies in order, in logic, in discipline. But there is another path, a softer, more ancient path. It is the path of surrender, not to the rules of society, but to the flow of the universe itself. In this surrender, we allow the storm to pass through us. We stop trying to be the sky and instead become the space that allows all weather. Sadness, joy, fear, love, they all move through like clouds. And we watch, we feel, we remain. To surrender is to say yes. Yes to the mess, the confusion, the uncertainty. Yes to the heartbreak. Yes to the fear. Yes, even to the parts of you that you have been trying to exile. The very things you push away are the things that ache to be acknowledged. And when you stop pushing, they stop screaming. What you resist intensifies. What you allow begins to soften. The idea that you must heal by force, through effort, through control, through fixing yourself, is part of the illusion. You do not fix the ocean by grabbing each wave and pushing it down. You allow the tide to move. You watch the currents shift. You float. And in floating, you begin to trust. Not because you know where the current leads, but because you realize the struggle was never helping you to begin with. There is a stillness that arises not from silence, but from surrender. That stillness is not the absence of noise, but the presence of acceptance. You no longer need to silence the mind. You simply stop obeying its panic. You no longer need to fix your feelings. You simply give them permission to exist. This shift, subtle yet profound, is what transforms anxiety from a cage into a companion. It is no longer the enemy. It becomes the guide. The paradox is that true peace does not come from seeking peace. It comes from ceasing the war against the self, the war against the present moment, the war against the parts of you that feel too much. When the war ends, what remains is not silence. It is freedom. It is not a forced quiet. It is an effortless stillness that arises naturally, like mist lifting off a calm lake. Surrender does not mean you never act. It does not mean you become passive or indifferent. It means you begin to act from alignment rather than fear. You move because it feels true, not because you're desperate to escape a feeling. You make choices not to control life, but to collaborate with it. You dance with the unknown instead of hiding from it. To surrender is to trust life, even when it does not make sense. It is to believe that your pain has purpose, even when it is not yet understood. It is to open your heart, even when it is bruised. It is to stand in the middle of the storm and say, I do not need this storm to end in order to be at peace. It is the quiet, holy rebellion against the belief that something must always be done, always be fixed, always be solved. So, what if everything you've been told about anxiety is not entirely true? What if it's not a malfunction, but a message? A call from the deeper part of your being, not asking to be fixed, but simply to be felt. Perhaps in your restlessness, there is a quiet intelligence waking up, noticing, questioning, peering beyond the veil. You were never meant to move through this life untouched, unfazed, unaffected. To be fully alive is to be vulnerable to the pulse of existence, to grieve, to love, to fear, to rejoice, and to tremble at the mystery of it all. Your anxiety may not be a sickness. It may be the sacred trembling of a soul remembering that this world, in all its chaos, was never meant to be controlled, only met with presence. The modern world wants you numb, but you are here to feel. It wants you obedient. You are here to wake up. And maybe, just maybe, the discomfort you carry is not a burden, but the cost of remembering who you truly are. You're not anxious, you're awake. And that makes all the difference.